Hello there. How are you doing today? Welcome back to a second week of the Kingdom Builders Credit Repair Financial and Credit Tips with Michelle Green. That's me, Michelle Green. Welcome. Come on in the room. Go ahead and make sure that you are subscribed to our YouTube channel so that you can enjoy our credit TV show. Listen, we are powered by CTR Media Network, and we just want to give a shout out to them right now and thank them for allowing this TV show to be possible. We are so excited to come to you another week to talk to you about financial and credit tips at Kingdom Builders Credit Repair. Some of you may know me by some other businesses, but I want you guys to know that this was my original company that was created years and years and years ago. And I've been in the credit industry for over 30 plus years, almost 35 to be exact. I know I don't look like it, but that's neither here nor there. We're not going to talk about beauty tips today. We're going to talk about credit and financial tips. And our particular topic today is about the FICO 10 score that everybody is talking about this new change that has come about in the credit industry with the credit scores. So last week we talked about the fact that credit scores and credit reports are not exactly the same thing, right? So we learned that when we look at a credit report, there are three areas that we want to pay attention to: our profiles, our inquiries, and our accounts. And when it comes to our credit and making sure that we are receiving the most ultimate credit score, one of the things that we want to do is just make sure that we are keeping up with our credit. We're looking at the actual credit reports and we understand that the scores are totally separate from the credit reports. We want to first just understand, like, how are we keeping up with those credit reports with Equifax, Experian, TransUnion, and Anovis. So let's talk about it just for a moment. When we think about credit, we first want to understand that credit is simply something that we don't have the money for right now. So we want a bank or a credit union to lend us that money until we can pay it back. Now, most of us don't necessarily intend on paying the money back. I know, I understand completely. Some of us go into the loan and we might have good intentions, but if something comes up in our life, we kind of just do away with trying to complete the whole ordeal. And then we end up with the late payments, the charge off write offs that lead us into collections. And before you know it, our credit is damaged and our scores take a really big hit, usually anywhere from 50 to 75, or even up to 200 points or more that we are deducted from our credit scores. So what we want to do is kind of get out ahead of the ball game. We want to discuss what we have going on right now with our credit, and we also want to discuss how we can improve our credit. And if push comes to shove and you absolutely need even more help, then that is what Kingdom Builders Credit Repair is all about. So you can definitely search us at kingdombuilderscreditrepair.com on the website. Go ahead and click that Let's Talk button and we can get you into our program so we can remove those late payments, those charge off write offs, and those collections or public record accounts. So, like we were saying, when we think about credit, we know that there is always going to be a situation where we don't have the money right now. So we need to leverage the money that we don't have by obtaining some type of debt, some type of loan, or some type of card. As we learned last week, that on our credit report, there are only two types of credit you're ever going to have: either a loan of some kind or a card of some kind. And when we break those two areas down, we understand that when we are obtaining a loan, we want to look at the whole balance that we owe and decide on when we are able to pay back the loan, not necessarily the terms of the company that allowed us to borrow the money. Because when we're thinking about paying that money back, we can actually make a decision to get ahead of the loan that we had to borrow, we can get ahead of it by making sure that we're making more than just the monthly minimum payments and break that down into two separate payments or four separate payments every single week or every single 2 weeks or every single 3 weeks, all the way up to a whole month, so that we can decide when we want to pay the loan off instead of the loan company, the bank or credit union deciding that we have to go by their terms and conditions. So if we begin to think about credit from that angle instead of looking at it from the perspective of I got to go by exact terms and conditions of what is required of me, then we can actually change our whole financial portfolio. And yes, we would have the ability to be free from being indebted. Now, I do want to just stop right here, park right here for just a moment, because there are a lot of us who believe that we can be financially free, and we can. But the thing about credit and finances is when we look at credit and finances and we're talking about being financially free, listen, you can be financially free, but in the credit world, if you don't have any kind of credit, then your reputation and the ability to have credit will go down. So we should understand that being financially free is not necessarily meaning that you won't have any type of debt whatsoever. It just means that you can control when you would pay off your own loan, when you would pay off your own credit card, which we learned last week that we should not be paying off our credit cards, right? Do you remember what we talked about last week? Well, I'm going to always reiterate that information because it is so necessary for us to understand that we should not necessarily be paying off credit card debt. We shouldn't be paying it off. We should be paying it down, because a credit card is a revolving line of credit. That means we're going around and around and around and around. We're going around and around in a circle to pay that thing down and to charge it back up. So we learned last week that we have loans that we want to pay bi-weekly or weekly, and then we have credit cards that we also want to pay down, but we don't want to necessarily pay off. Okay, so we want to always understand that financial freedom is the ability to be able to have finances still showing on your credit, but having the control of being able to pay it off or pay it down at will, at will. So most of us are not in a position with our finances and with our credit to be able to pay off anything because we have too much debt. So we have plans of budgeting. We're going to be talking about in the future about budgeting and how to control those finances so that we can put ourselves in a better position. But that's later on another day, another week of Kingdom Builders Credit Repair TV show. All right, so let's get into what our topic is today. We were talking about the credit scores, in particular the changes that are coming out about the new FICO 10T credit scoring model. So let's back up just for a second. When we think about credit scores, we need to understand that there was an original company that created the FICO credit scores. There was a company that decided that there needed to be a number that would rate how well we were managing our finances and how well we were managing our credit. That original company is called MyFICO, myfico.com, and I'm giving shout out to MyFICO. So I hope you guys are listening so that you can give us some props here at Kingdom Builders Credit Repair. What my FICO did is decide that they're going to develop a system or a model that would calculate how well we made our payments on time, how much total debt that we would own. They would also calculate the history of how long we had our accounts open over the past 24 months. Did we open the account longer than the last 24 months? Or did we just open up a brand new account, which would be another calculation that they are rating your credit score on? and they would look at the new credit. They would look at the kind of credit that you have. So that leads me into the conversation of understanding that when we look at our credit scores through, I will say, the real credit scoring model of my FICO, then when we're looking at our credit scores through my FICO, we have to understand that just like they gave us different calculations on different areas of our finances, the main thing that we have to understand about the FICO system is that there are different types of credit that will give us different types of scores. So we talked a little bit about that last week. But I want us to really be able to dive in and understand, like, when you are looking at your My FICO numbers, and by the way, My FICO is not a free service. So it's not as though you're going to be able to just go ahead and jump in and get your My FICO and everything is free like the other scoring systems. So that is one of the main reasons why it's so important for us to understand, like, we don't just go out and obtain any system in order to get our accurate credit score. Our most accurate credit score is ran through the system of my FICO. So when we're looking at my FICO, guess what we need to do? We need to make sure that with my FICO, we are actually going into that particular system and looking at a series of credit scores so that we will be able to understand which credit score we need to go by based on which type of credit we are establishing. Does that make sense, y'all? So, when we talk about the credit scores, when we look at the credit scoring system, when we decide that we are going to go by this FICO system, we have to break down the fact that there are credit card scores. That's going to be your general score when you establish the MyFICO system. Then you have the personal loan scores, you have the vehicle loan scores, you have the mortgage loan scores. And out of the tiers of the types of credit, guess what? The mortgage is the highest tier of credit that you're ever going to have in your life. So, if you're trying to buy a house, if you're trying to buy a vehicle, just know and understand that your mortgage score is always going to be a higher tier of credibility than your vehicle score. So that means that the credit score for my FICO is actually going to be lower in the mortgage arena than it is for the actual vehicle arena, because the mortgage carries more weight. We know that a mortgage is like the longest term of loan that we will ever have in our life, I would say, besides student loans. When we look at those student loans, they almost neck and neck with that mortgage, right? But hopefully there will be some things coming down the line, down the road, that will allow us to be able to completely eliminate those student loan debts, and or at least get in control of the student loan debt so there's not as much that we have to pay back for getting an education. All right. So, as I was saying, we're talking about this FICO score. So, first, we understand that the My FICO score is listed in different types of credit. So, it's not just like one score for everything, like most of us are thinking when we look at our credit scores. We have to realize and understand that there is a different credit score for every single kind of credit that's out there. Okay. And so when we're talking about this FICO system, the FICO 8 model is the average model for your general credit cards and your credit, like, department store cards. So we used to call them charge accounts, like your Walmart, your Targets, your, Sam's Club or J.C. Penney's, Belks, Macy's. Those are what we consider charge accounts or department store cards. And department store cards are different than credit cards. When we look at department store cards, we know that we can only use those at one of two places. But when we're talking about the actual credit card, the credit card is able to be used anywhere that we want to use it. Wherever we process a debit card at, if we have a credit card, that's going to work the same way as our debit, except that it's something that will be responsible on our credit report for us to pay down and then use over again. So when we're looking at the credit score model, we want to understand that the FICO 8 is going to be the first thing that we see when we open up that My FICO account and we begin to look at, okay, well, what score am I actually looking for? Are you trying to buy a house? Are you trying to buy a car? Whatever you're trying to do, guess what? That's going to be the type of model that you are looking for. Last week, we talked a little bit about the mortgage scores being under the FICO model of 5, 4, and 2. So 5, 4, and 2 FICO score models give us a rating for a mortgage because those ratings require a lot more when they look at the details of how much debt you owe and how often do you make your payments and are you making the payments on time, and then what is your scheduled payment, and we look at the length of time that you've had those accounts open and the kind of credit that you have open, as well as any new credit that you have established recently. So again, those are the 5 different areas that your credit score through FICO is being calculated. That's your outstanding debt, your payment history, your credit history, the length of time that you've been with a company, the type of credit that you've established, and whether or not you have any new credit that recently has been added within the last 6 months to 2 years. So when we look at these things, we have to understand that our scores are not just basic scores. We don't just go into the basic score model and look at, okay, well, I got this FICO 8 score and it's just going to be what it is. I see it and it's there and I'm getting ready to, go by this is my number. These are my numbers for Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion, which we know are our 3 major credit bureaus. But then the Anovis is not going to be listed because it's not a major credit bureau. So that score number will not be on the My FICO system. But when we look at those scores, we just want to have the understanding that we have to look at the different score models in order for us to be able to understand what it is that we are able to obtain based on our credit scores. So let's talk about this new FICO 10T. Now, last week we discussed that there is a new model that is coming out, and that 10T is a model that is coming out for people to be able to benefit from their utilities being added to their credit. Now, some of you may have already started setting up some utilities on your credit, and it is also known as alternative or supplemental credit that we add to our credit report currently, even though the FICO 10T is just now coming out, and it is supposed to be a model that will be used among most lenders going forward to rate your credit score to see if you are taking your utilities and paying those bills on time, as well as the things that are on your credit, which are your debts. So again, last week we learned that your utilities and your debts are 2 different categories. And we really want to understand that because the difference is that one, which is your utilities, are recyclable bills, things that you always need to pay. In other words, you have a phone and you have to pay for a service. You have a house or an apartment, a townhouse, a condo, and that house or whatever home that you are living in, it will not work without electricity. So you have to pay for the service of the electricity. If you have anything that is a utility, then you have to continue the maintenance on the utility in order for the utility to be in existence, in order for you to benefit from any type of utility. So utilities were never ever designed to be on your credit because utilities show us how we basically live. Now, the FICO 10T coming out is going to be teaching us that we can now put our utilities on our credit, but that's not going to start on March the 17th like they initially rolled out. That's actually starting on June the 15th, is what the new date has been suggested for it to come out and roll out, so that now we can add our alternative or our supplemental credit to our credit reports. Now, in the past, I have really been, really trying to make sure that we understand as people that we do not put utilities on our credit. And the reason why is because some of us pay our utilities on time and some of us don't. But one of the key point reasons why I would not suggest to put your utilities on your credit is because when a lender looks at your credit report and they see utilities, especially if it's broken utilities, where utilities that you have not completed making your payments on time. And let's talk about that payment on time for just a second. To make a payment on time, whether it's a utility or a debt, something that's on your credit, you would have to pay prior to the due date 30 days. Last week, I gave you a little pop quiz, and that quiz is if you're due on the first of the month, but you don't get paid until the fifth of the month, how many days would you actually be late? So, whatever month is coming up, if your due date is the first and you pay your bill on the fifth, you would actually be 35 days past due, not 5 days or 4 days or 3 days past due. You will be 35 days past due. And that is something that most of us just don't get. We don't understand that we are shooting ourselves in the foot because we are not paying our bills on time, our utilities. So if we're going to start putting utilities on our credit, the first thing we need to understand is the due date is not the first day to pay the bill. The due date is the last day to pay the bill. So if you are waiting until, let's say, you're due on the first of the month to pay your light bill, or you're due on the first of the month to pay your rent, and you don't pay that rent until the 10th or the 5th, then you are already behind the eight ball. And do you really want that kind of information to show up on your credit report? No, we don't. The second major reason why having a utility or a alternative line of credit that is a utility on your credit is not necessarily beneficial right now is because, like I said, when we think of a utility, we think of the doctor bill, the light bill, the dentist bill, the eye doctor, the insurance companies. And we all know too well that there are hiccups that come up in our life where we may not be able to pay the insurance on time. We may pay the insurance every 6 months or a year. Or if we are paying it per month, we might have a situation that arises and we'll just extend that date out a little bit. But I'm here to say that a grace period doesn't necessarily protect you from being late on your credit report. So that is a real problem that could occur with this new FICO 10T system or score model that could really harm your credit. It could benefit your credit if you're used to paying your bills on automatic drafts, so you know ahead of time that you got that money in the bank, and when that money runs through, you're going to be able to have that payment made on time or before time. Like we talked about last week, make sure you are paying your bill 2 weeks before the due date and the week of the due date. Don't wait until the date that is due or after to pay it, because then you're always going to be in a cycle or a mindset to pay your bills late. And we don't want to do that, right? So we want to look at the different areas of benefit for utilities to be on our credit versus the different areas that it may not be such a great idea to add the alternative utilities to our credit. Again, they are called supplemental and alternative lines of credit. So when we look at the FICO T, there are some benefits that if you have been paying your bills on auto draft, your utilities, if you have been making sure that you are always paying on time, you're always paying consistently around the same amount of money, and that you're always paying that balance off, then that could greatly benefit you by having the new FICO 10T system for my FICO. That will help you because what they will be tracking is how soon do you pay your bills off. If you're the kind of person that when as soon as you get paid, you're already setting aside enough money to cover every utility in your house, as you should. The first thing you should cover is your taxes, then your insurance, and then your savings. And then after that, you got your food, your grocery bill. You want to make sure that you cover your lights, your water, your rent, and all of those things. You want to make sure if you have a security system, all of those things are covered. So with the new FICO 10T, if you're the kind of person that always pays off their balances early, then this is going to be a big benefit for you. This is going to be huge because now you'll be able to add those utilities to your credit. And when you add those utilities to your credit, guess what? You're going to get anywhere from 50 to 100-point increase. But like I said, if you're not used to being disciplined with your money and with your credit, if you're not used to being that kind of person who is going to make sure that the bill is covered before it is even due, then you may not want to start adding any kind of utilities to your credit. Here's another thing that is calculated in the FICO 10T scoring model that's coming out soon. So when we look at the different areas of how they calculate a utility. How is a utility presented on your credit report? One of the things that we look at is what is your monthly payment? What is your total amount that you borrowed? Because that's the whole reason why you needed the credit in the first place. So, what is the original amount that you borrowed? What is your scheduled payment? And what is your balance? Okay, so we've already established that the new FICO 10T is going to help us if we can pay our balances down or off quickly from our original amount that we borrowed. And that's basically how utilities work anyway. So you have a light bill, the light bill is $250, and you go ahead and pay that $250, and then you have a zero balance. But there are other calculations that will also be implemented within that. When we look at a utility cannot necessarily show a original amount borrowed in addition to a scheduled monthly payment and a balance that is different from the other two. So if we have to show as alternative credit that your original borrowed amount is 250, like I just gave in that light bill example, and then we turn around and show that your scheduled monthly payment is $250, and then your balance is $250, then there is no way that we can figure out how well you're doing to pay your bills back. Does that make sense? So if your credit limit, your scheduled monthly payment, and your balance are all the same amounts, then there is no variation in your monthly payment, there's no variation in your credit limit, and there's no variation in your balance until you pay it off. But on the credit report, it may still show the same amount that you are scheduled to pay, as well as the same amount that you originally borrowed. Where technically with the utility, you're not borrowing money, but you are borrowing the amount of money that it costs for you to provide that service, or for that service to be provided to you. So you just want to really stop and think about for a minute, is this something that I really want to participate in? Do I really want to begin to add every single rent, lights, water, cable, insurance, all of the things that I am doing on a daily basis so that I can have a great living, so a basic living. Okay, so what I'm saying is that the FICO 10T may be a model in the scoring system that is available, but is it really a model that is available to you as a benefit or a privilege? Will this bring your score up, or will this bring your score down? Okay, so I'm just going to leave that with you today to think about. Do you normally pay off your balances? Do you normally pay your bills before they are due? Do you normally have longevity with the same companies over and over again? Or do you like to kind of check around to see if you can get with another company that's going to give you a greater discount? So those are three key pointers that you want to take into consideration before the new FICO 10T comes out and is hitting our FICO system so that we can rate our scores properly. Okay. And again, if you are interested in getting your credit repaired, if you're interested in doing a money management budget, then guess what? We at Kingdom Builders Credit Repair can certainly help you. Go to our website now. It's www.kingdombuilderscreditrepair.com, or you can call us at 844-522-7552. We would love to talk to you about your credit issues, your financial issues. I am a financial advisor. Again, my name is Michelle Green, and I've been doing business in credit and finances for over 30 years, and we would love to help you today. Make sure that you have subscribed to our channel so you won't miss the credit and financial tips at any point in time. And until next week, you have a great day and continue to be blessed. Bye bye.